Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, audience participation. We've already nailed that. Right. I'm Liam, and throughout the next hour, I'm going to be explaining to you one of the most interesting ways I've ever gotten data off of a secure network. Now, there will be some stories. There's a little bit of coding involved in this, but don't worry, it's not like I'm not trying to code along with me. Any of that nonsense. And full disclosure, this technique only works against some networks, and I was fortunate enough to run into some of these networks, as I'll be explaining. Now, obligatory, who's this geezer and why should I listen to him? So a couple of my social things are on the screen. All of it's nonsense. The GitHub's got some cool tools on it. In fact, the tool that I'm going to be talking about that I've written for this will be released on there when I stop going out to pubs in the evening and actually get around to writing the rest of it. But I'm Liam. I'm an application check team leader and senior penetration tester for KPMG. And as I said, all the social stuff's on there. If you want to email me any questions after this, that's great. But for every question, I need at least one cat picture, and it's got to be unique. So, got to pay the tax. Now, onto the talk proper. Are we all sitting comfortably? Because it's story time. Excellent. Then I can get into it. The background of this, I initially got interested in DNS-based data exfiltration following an engagement I was on in 2021. I was brought on to support the application testing for a large piece of work we were doing for a client, and also to review certain software configurations. However, this portion of the testing was completed way ahead of schedule, and so I was reassigned to the purple teaming arm of the whole thing. This team, I'm sure most of us know what purple teaming is. It's when our red team was sat with their SOC, and basically they were just trying to do some stuff and seeing what caused an alert. And if something did cause an alert, it was you passed. And if it didn't cause an alert, we said you probably want to set just some more alerting around some of this. It was the basic premise of it. So, internal and external parts kind of broke down. There was internal, external, and then ingress and egress testing. Data ingress and egress. Internal, external parts, the team that I was now joining had already got a lot of good results. They'd found some bypasses, they'd implemented new logging. They were running into some problems on the ingress and egress parts. Their network was very well configured, they had a lot of good security controls, their mail filtering was excellent, you couldn't email documents out, they were getting blocked. All the protocols were properly locked down. It was a pretty well-built network. And, well, almost well-built. I have a background in application testing, and so I'm familiar with the DNS-based external service interaction. Anyone who's ever used Burp Suite Pro knows the Burp Collaborator servers, and you can use this to prove various misconfigurations within applications. And so I wondered, well, if I'm sat on this network, can I use Collaborator to prove that we can get data out? Because if I can trigger an outbound DNS request, I won't bore you with the basics of DNS data exfiltration. There's people who can explain that far better than I can. But effectively, you take some data, you append it as a subdomain, Collaborator payload, or anything you own the authoritative server for, and you can get data off of network. Nice and simple. And lo and behold, we got a hit. Now, the network architect, after very successfully tying down almost everything that was could possibly be misconfigured with this network, wasn't very happy with this, but we managed to prove it. They added a load of logging and monitoring around weird domains in their external DNS, and so say if you did try to look up oastify.com, it'd be logged, it'd be alerted on, and then they can go and isolate something. Clearly something weird's going on, and we'll go and fix that, switch the machine off, do all your normal kind of responsible activities around that. So this engagement was successful for all parties. Us as the pen testers, we felt, oh great, we found something really cool, we found the hole, and the blue team managed to get it all locked down, sorted, and the report was glowing. Now, we'll fast forward 6 months, and I was tasked with another similar test, but for a different client this time. Now, during the briefing, the immortal words were uttered. Don't worry, our network is unhackable. Now, I don't know if any of you in the room either are pen testers, are red teamers, or have ever worked with them. That is the biggest red rag to a bull you could ever possibly start to wave. Oh, and we accepted it. So we noticed something weird on their network. You could connect to arbitrary IPs from within the network. Now, we tried the obvious things when you see this, connect to a dodgy website. For data exfiltration, flagged instantly. Our host got nuked and had to reset it all back up. We tried SSH, FTP, SMB shares, but these also lit the sock up like a Christmas tree. It was a pretty well-configured network. So we turned our attention, once again, to DNS. We tried the same thing we tried 6 months previously, triggering a DNS lookup to an arbitrary domain. Again, it was just a collaborator server. It's nothing particularly advanced. And we got a hit, but so did the SOC. And then they nuked our box and laughed at us, which we didn't like, especially given the previous comments. So it's time to get back to the drawing board. Forgive the really bad light bulb photo here, but hey, we'll run with it. Back to the light bulb moment in question. It was the domain we were looking up that they got alerted on, not the triggering of the request to an outbound server, external service, which got me thinking. Parameter that time forgot. So the third parameter of an NS lookup or dig command is you can specify a domain server that you can want to look your domain name up against. And given the particular set of circumstances we found ourselves in, where we could trigger an arbitrary outbound connection, and the DNS alerting was based on the domain, not the destination, we spun up a DNS server in AWS to try something. Our initial test was pretty simple. This is just a demo. This is obviously from the live test. It's easy enough to write a DNS server in Python. You can find an example of one online. It's about 25 lines long. Very easy. We deployed it. We ran a little check, and lo and behold, it got out. Now, we'd used a silly domain for this. I think it was you got hacked lol or something like that. We were just kind of writing this when we were quite tired. So it still got flagged. But now we had a theory we could use. This is where my crippling caffeine addiction comes in handy. I'm sure everybody in here either has one or will develop one. So if you're a student getting into cyber, well done. Yeah, you got some coffee there. Nice. There wasn't a lot of time left in the engagement. But a combination of two things. One, I have a love of coffee. And two, somebody had said that their network was unhackable. So I, again, heated up the coffee machine and I got to work because we had a theory and I had all the motivation in the world and a lot of heavy stimulants, which were own caffeine for legal reasons. As I said at the start, don't worry, the rest of this is not a play-by-play of me writing this tool. That would be quite dull. I wouldn't make you all sit through that. But I'm going to take a moment to quickly explain the process behind grabbing the data. This is a little snippet of how we've taken it. This is all written in Python. Python's quite easy to write, so I decided to go for that. Grab the relevant values and the split at the bottom, which we'll explain a bit later. The code for this isn't particularly sophisticated, which was good because, again, it was about 1 a.m. at this point and the engagement ended in a very short time frame. So we were on the clock. So we managed to pull this off. That domain looks a little bit interesting, and I'll explain exactly how it's been formed there. But this is version 1 of the tool that I'll be showing you later. You use 2 subdomains on a normal domain to allow DNS-based exfiltration. And that was the legitimate reaction of one of the network engineers when we pulled this off, and he realized that it could get out. I've asterisked it out there, and I won't be repeating it. But you still needed 2 subdomains. So the reason why you needed 2 subdomains is base64 requires capital letters and padding characters, which DNS doesn't traditionally support. So you need a second subdomain to capture this so you can reformat a lowercase string into uppercase, lowercase, and special characters. The way in which the tool does this is on the screen behind me. 1 corresponds to an uppercase letter, 0 to a lower or a number, and then this also allows you to capture the padding characters as well, because you can compare the lengths of the 2 strings, and then you know exactly how much padding you need to add, and that you can use this on certain exams if you need to get cookies outside of a firewall. You can use that, but in JavaScript, to encode the cookie and exfiltrate it, but that's outside the scope of this talk. Quick aside, why not hex? capturing the basic. I've added this. I did this talk again at B-Sides Cambridge for any of you that were there, and somebody at the after party pointed out, why didn't you use hex? Well, and I thought that's a great idea. Why didn't I? The answer is I was very, very tired at the time, and again on caffeine. So we didn't think of that. We stuck with base 64. So, but that in turn then led us to something else, enabled us to do something a little bit cooler. Right. Asides aside, we're back to our engagement. I now had a legitimate way of getting data off of the network, but the dodgy subdomains were being flagged, and again, the clock was running down. So this is when brainwave number 2 hit. The client was using the Office 365 suite, which I'm sure many of us here do. There is about 1 million different domains across the Microsoft estate, and they're always changing them, they're always adding to them. It makes trying to set up an Azure tenancy and actually bookmark anything completely impossible. In fact, importantly enough, it has so many different domains. You can assign each domain, or pick a domain, and assign it to each of the entire base 64 character set. So now you have a unique domain that maps back to one character within the character set allowed by base 64, 65 characters. So here, using base 64 as opposed to something like hex actually comes in handy because you're spreading your data out across more domains. This little snippet shows the start of how I decided to do the mapping. Effectively, you load up a list of 65 domains. Subdomains of Microsoft.com came to about 150, so you've got loads to play from. If you are more intimately aware with the architecture your client's using, or what kind of tools they use, or what domains they're more likely to be browsing to, you can customize that as well. There's also I will come back to this, which I didn't. That's still in the tool, so we'll see if I refactor that before I release it. Probably not. So this engagement was pretty much over, but we'd managed to string together a series of kind of key observations. We'd known that you could get arbitrary connections out to external services. We knew that they were logging the wrong part of the DNS packet, and we knew, well, not the wrong part, but the part that we weren't necessarily as interested in. And we knew they were using Microsoft, and that this substitution cipher might actually work. So the encoding is shown above here. Again, as another side note, the letter A changes every time you run the tool. That took me far too long to figure out how to do, but is still the most important part of the tool. But if you pass a list of domains to the processor, the domains that have just been spat out there, it can fire them off to our external server, recompile them. You've then got base 64. I've used a string in the above example, but you could theoretically do this to whatever data you wanted to, encode the file, and exfiltrate it. Now, on the engagement, we pulled this attack off, sat back and grinned at the network architect who famously several slides ago said, our network is unhackable, because they didn't catch this at all. To their credit, they took it very, very well, and we sat about trying to fix the issue. Other network architects may not have taken it so well. We were grinning quite churlishly when we broke the news to them. So, kind of back to why this works, why this will work. This attack works because of kind of misconfiguration and how logging is applied to DNS. Now, there's two important parts of a DNS packet, and there's the queue name, which we've shown on some slides earlier, which is the name you're looking up, and there's the destination address. Now, because of how DNS works, again, going back to the keynote earlier, somebody asked you how breathing works. DNS is a little bit like breathing to me. I know how the top level works, but honestly, it's a little bit further past that. It gets very confusing. Effectively, it's recursive though, and a lot of the logging applied to it therefore ignores the destination address because it doesn't really matter. Normally, a request would go to your server and go out and work its way around until you got an answer and then come back. So in this instance, they weren't logging the destination address. They were only logging the queue name. Now, again, if you log the queue name, that's good if it's a dodgy domain. If it's oastify.com, you can highlight it and go off and do exactly what you need to do with it. But in this instance, they had forgotten to log the second parameter, and so that now allows us to do searches for non-attacker controlled domains against our external server, and thus get network out for it. And if you're just logging the queue name and you're just alerting on that, you won't catch it because it looks like a legitimate domain that your users would actually be trying to get to. And why it doesn't work. So, as I said at the start, this probably isn't the next great data exfiltration method. There are quite a lot of things that have to line up before you can use this to get data off of networks. When you pull it off, though, it feels really cool. So do try it, and if it does work, well, you might not be able to let me know, but give me a little wink the next time you see me, and I'll know what you mean. It is more likely to be possible if you compromise maybe a developer network, admin's network, something like that, or smaller, less mature businesses who maybe don't have all the fancy bells and whistles and security tooling out there that can catch some of these and has caught it when we've tried to use it on other engagements. My modelling dreams died with that photo. Why on earth would you invest so much time? This was the question that the network admin later asked us. It's like, why did you invest so much time? Clearly you saw the bags under my eyes after all the late nights I'd done putting this together. It's like, why would you invest something into this that you can only pull off on a select few networks? Again, we've tried this on other networks and it got blocked. There is a kind of chain of things that have to line up. The stars really have to align before you can pull this off. Well, it's a good question, and we answered it. The first time is we were very honest, and we said you did tell us your network was unhackable. That is a red rag to a bull. If you're ever working with pen testers and you want them to do loads of free extra overtime for you, just say that to them, and that's value for money right there. Seriously, I think to me this is kind of what pen testing is all about. You take a unique challenge, you solve it, and then you solve it to a degree where other people can learn from it and hopefully use it for themselves, and you can distribute it back. Again, we're all here at a community event. It's good to give back to that community. Can we fix it? So we've spoken about how we actually pulled off the attack, how me and the team pulled off the attack. Now, how do you fix it? Well, good news, there are a few options. The first is you can run your own DNS server and block all other paths out. But in the modern world, with elastic IPs and the like, this becomes increasingly difficult. In fact, the last time I suggested to somebody that could run their own DNS server, they threw something at me. You can stick a whole heap of monitoring on your network, but make sure you monitor the right thing. Not just the key name, but also just the destination. As part of this toolkit that is being released, there is also a sample DNS server that scrubs traffic. So you can configure this to either have a dedicated DNS server, 1111, 888, whatever, or whitelist certain domains, so you whitelist login.microsoftonline.com, and it'll let that through after scrubbing the destination server. You can also configure this on some of the products that you may already use, and also the one that I'm using as an example that is on GitHub or will be, hasn't been tested in a live environment, so please test it before using it. I don't want any angry letters from anybody who managed to get ransomware because they deployed my shoddy Python code that I wrote after several glasses of wine and nothing else. So again, please test it. Disclaimer, please test it before you use it. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, mate.
Did you find any problems with timing, data loss, and what sort of transfer ratios do you find?
Okay, for anyone who didn't hear that, it's any problems with timing, data loss, or transmission. We did, but the droppers that we wrote waited for the response to come back first. So that's how we dealt with that. And it would just try it again and again until it got through, until it got a response. And we customized the responses so that the dropper knew that it got on a response from what it was trying to look for. But injecting like TXT records and things, so it knew that it was finding the right thing. But initially, yes. But then we had to put it. Oh, sorry, yeah, the transfer rate. That's the important part, right? It's not amazingly quickly. Again, you'd struggle to get things off very fast if time was of the essence. We managed to get some kind of small files, thousands of kilobytes and things off networks, but again, we were more using this as a proof of concept as opposed to actually try and like ransomware someone and use this to get data off their network. Yes, mate.
Do you think that the frequency of DNS requests could be used in SOCs to detect this kind of method?
Yes, it can. That's how we. That's how one of the clients. That was one of the controls they put on their network was how frequent they'd DNS request, and we hadn't quite developed this capability yet. But if we had, I presume that it would have caught that. Unfortunately, if you can't catch how they're getting the data out, though, they can just slow down and take a little bit longer. But yes, you certainly could if somebody was being a bit noisy in that respect. Any more? Yes, mate.
Was there any sort of hacking tools on GitHub that inspired you for this, or any threat groups that pay attention to what they're using that inspired you?
There's some really interesting DNS export toolkits out there. The one that kind of gave me the idea for this is there's another tool that you can use non-attacker controlled domains for, but you have to be within the network boundary. You have to be able to intercept, or upstream of it, sorry. You have to be able to intercept the DNS requests, and then you capture them there, and it doesn't really matter. Unfortunately, the name of it eludes me. If I remember it, I'll dig it out and I'll post it somewhere. But the biggest motivation was somebody said the network was unhackable, and I don't like that. Any more? Lovely stuff. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.